first and foremost, we as leaders, we're expected to absorb the fear and exude hope. We wanted to create the tools and the techniques that would just reduce the drama and the chaos that comes with trying to scale up any kind of venture. This is a time to be ambitious. You know, it's a little bit like what the great investors do.
Verne Harnish is the founder of the Entrepreneurs Organization, CEO of Scaling Up, and author of bestsellers like Scaling Up and Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. For 4 decades, Verne has helped leaders scale their companies with less chaos and more impact.
Who survives is not the fittest. It's who survives is the most adaptable. If you've got this ability to see what's happening sooner than the competition and you're able to adapt sooner than the competition, you win. If every employee can be asked one question every week, and it would be this: what is...
So welcome to the Sparks by Ignium podcast. I'm Phil Rose, your host, and today I'm delighted to welcome Verne Harnish, founder of Scaling Up, to the podcast. I've been a member of Scaling Up for the last 24 plus months and have loved what I've heard. I met Verne for the first time for real in Dallas in April this year, and then later on in Dublin with Brian Keegan for another event. So I'm welcoming him to the show. I appreciate him taking his time out from his busy schedule. Verne Harnish, welcome to Sparks by Ignium.
Phil, it is an honor to join you. And thank you, by the way, for joining our tribe. We've got now a little over 200 certified scaling partners on 7 continents, and we're trying to do our best to help this kind of unsung heroes of our local and global economies, because they're the ones, you guys are the ones that are doing all the heavy lifting, innovations, jobs, and all of that. So Phil, it's great to have you on the team.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a great learning for me over the time, having done this for a long time before, just to get into this new business effectively and learn more skills. So when we talked before this, we said we're not going to go into history, but there's one piece I want to just touch on, which is that founder of the EO and how that morphed into Scaling Up. So just 30 seconds on what got you here, because Marshall Goldsmith always says what got you here won't get you there, but actually I think it has got you here. So I wonder, just quick nugget, how did you get here?
Well, the short of it is I had a chance to host Steve Jobs back in 1986 for his first public speech after being fired from Apple. And I had about 1,200 entrepreneurs there: Michael Dell, Mark Cuban, many of the well-known names today. They were all in their 20s. And Steve ended up staying for the party that I threw for that group afterwards, but he was standing alone in the corner. And at that moment, I looked to a good friend of mine, Greg Stem, and I said, look, there needs to be an organization for the Steve Jobs of the world. And I recalled a quote of a good friend of mine, Joe Mancuso, who said, "It's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone."
Wow.
I would say it's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone. And so that night was the idea that birthed what's today the Entrepreneurs Organization. We're about 16,000 members, going to 160,000, hopefully, over the next decade worldwide. And you know what? At least there's 16,000 entrepreneurs through our forums and the like that are not alone. So I figured it needed an executive program like YPO has a relationship with Harvard. So I went next door to MIT. And 35 years ago, I launched an executive program today called EMP, the Entrepreneurial Masters Program. They still let the old man come back and teach in it. And it was there that I was able to kind of birth the tools. There's a lot of information, Phil, as you know, for startups. There's kind of an incubator on every corner, 11,000 new companies every hour in the world. So I don't think we're hurting for new companies. And I have an MBA that's supposed to teach you how to run a big company, but there wasn't the parenting manual of how to grow up a company. And so I took a decade, 91 to 2001, moving about 1,000, really accomplished entrepreneurs through that MIT program. And out of that came my first book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. Updated it to Scaling Up in 2014. And so, we wanted to create the tools and the techniques that would just reduce the drama and the chaos that comes with trying to scale up any kind of venture from a few million to hundreds of million, which is kind of our sweet spot.
Yeah,
that's where it came from.
Love it. And I love that about reducing the drama and chaos. And I think at this moment, that's probably a really good segue into what's going on in the world. Here we are, 24th of August, 2022. Some people see drama and chaos everywhere. Some people see opportunity. Our job as scaling up coaches is to help convert those who have the drama and chaos mindset to think about the opportunities out there. Scaling Up, you're just about to re-release the Scaling Up book. What was the thing that made you think this is the time to do this, apart from time in your diary?
Yeah, well, we are coming out of the pandemic. The book has been out for 8 years, and we've learned a lot, particularly through the pandemic. And so, yeah, it's significantly revised. It'll be out October 18th at our summit in Denver. And there were several significant pivots that we made in the book. One, original book, I opened with a story that was all about the money. And of course, money, the financial side is important in the business, but I think people have come around and realized if I'm going to keep my employees engaged, that it's got to be as much about purpose as it is profit. And so I changed the intro to really emphasize that we're there to support how do you scale up your impact, the real reach. And that's why most entrepreneurs do what they do, is they want to solve a problem that they see. Naomi Simpson and Red Balloon, we got her when she had first launched the company in 2005 in Sydney, Australia. And next year they'll do $250 million in revenue. But that's not the important thing to Naomi. It's that she has been delivering an experience instead of stuff. The difference she wants to make is it's a lot different if you give somebody an experience. They're going to remember that versus just give them some stuff.
Yeah.
And so they've been delivering an experience. 2017, there was about one every 2.5 minutes. Their BHAG is to be at one experience delivered sustainably every second.
Wow.
By 2030. We're talking about a 30x kind of improvement. By the way, right now they're running one about every 39 seconds.
That's amazing. Amazing.
In there, we featured Hester, who launched a company called Tover. It's a Dutch-based firm. And what they've done is created 100+ games being used in 16 countries to help people with cognitive challenges. And when we first started working with her, she had an aggressive goal to reach 1 million people a day playing these games. But given the magnitude of this challenge of cognitive issues around the planet, we got her to see, and she feels now with our tools and techniques, she can do it, that she'll be able to touch 30 million people a day by 2030. And look, obviously her profits are going to come along, but what really energizes her is the impact that they can have in making people's lives better. And then we featured Don Wells, who's got a nonprofit. Our tools work as much in that world. We call it the for-purpose world. And he works with foster youth, about 1,600 a year. And his initial BHAG was to try to take that to 16,000. But after working with us, again, he said, you know what? I can see that with your tools and techniques, that we can get that to 100,000 youth, that foster youth that we can be helping. And so in all of these cases, it really is as much about the impact that we scale. And with our tools, then you're going to be able to have the numbers come with it. Because what you don't want to do is grow broke.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies can end up growing broke, and that's what we want to avoid.
Yeah. And I think that's the key point, isn't it? Coming out of the back of the pandemic, we're seeing, a lot of inflationary pressures on businesses at the moment worldwide. We've got massive inflation in the UK, up to 18% at the moment, and predicted to go higher. We're going to see interest rates rising. On the back of the pandemic, we've also had great resignation. So businesses are, in some cases, struggling, but also running scared. And I believe that word purpose is what unites people. But other people think, hey, it's not about purpose, it's just about keeping cash and making the business work. So we've got this real conundrum for these purpose-led businesses. What's the thing that we can do within Scaling Up to get that balance in people's lives again, so they can start seeing the wood for the trees and focusing on what's real for them?
Yeah. Well, there it's important that you make a couple of decisions. And look, we're expected for it to be chaotic over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of quotes that were shared by some top entrepreneurs at the beginning of this pandemic. We hosted Greg Brenneman, who turned around Continental Airlines, and he's been the turnaround guy for many, many companies. And in some sense, all of us feel like we're in a perpetual turnaround, given all of these pressures that are coming in that you just described. And he said, first and foremost, we as leaders, we're expected to absorb the fear and there is a lot of fear that those things create, and exude hope.
Yeah.
And that's, it's not fair, but we set the tone in our organizations. And one of the things that I think we've got to do then is what Margaret Heffernan, the great serial entrepreneur and well-known author there in the UK,
Yeah.
said at the beginning of the pandemic, and that is that this is a time to be ambitious. It's a little bit like what the great investors do. They hold their cash like Warren Buffett did,
Yeah.
why the market was going through the roof. And then in March, at some point of what he thought was roughly the bottom of the market, he went all in with his 51 billion.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to be kind of counterintuitive, that what I see when there's inflationary times and interest rates and all of this, I see those as blocking strategies. If those are moats, that if you can figure out how to thrive, and that's what our tools and again our approach help you methodically figure out. If you can figure out how to take advantage of that and thrive, these times just wipe out all of your weak competitors and really provide you an opportunity to be ambitious. And so really two things. I think this is the time to be ambitious. So that's why we've seen our clients really up their big, hairy, audacious goals.
Yeah.
And it's a time for you to really exude hope. Now, what does that mean in a practical sense? That is, you've got to have the thing that has helped everybody win all wars and markets is intel. You have to be so in touch with your customers and your employees we're talking about a daily basis.
Yeah.
And you've got to use that intel through our daily huddle and our weekly meeting. You want to move faster, pulse faster. Remember, who survives is not the fittest. It's who survives is the most adaptable. And if you've got this ability to see what's happening sooner than the competition, and you're able to adapt sooner than the competition, you win. So it's that learn, decide, act cycle. If it's the old OODA loop of fighter pilots, if you can observe and orient and act quicker than the other fighter pilot, you win, and they lose. So that's what our tools do, is allow you to remain agile and to get the intel and make the decision slightly quicker than everyone else in the marketplace. And that's a huge advantage.
I think that's true, actually. And, one of the tools that I love, and I think we've used a lot over the last 2 years through the pandemic, is, the sweat tool, strengths, weaknesses, and trends. And I think one thing that, really become apparent to me in using that is, we often talk about the opportunities and threats, which is that internal focus and the external macro picture. But actually, we're not looking at those trends in the marketplace, the trends in the industry, the trends in the society. And that's the bit where I'm seeing massive value for people when they're just getting a different perspective on the world by using that macro image of what's going on, and then looking internally and say, okay, what are we good at? What do we need to work on? And really focusing on their core competence to drive potential for themselves.
Yeah. And then, the other thing that we really focus on, we get down to the details around, for instance, pricing. Not a lot of folks in our world really have their clients sit down and focus on what are the strategies around pricing. And if you don't get those things nailed right away, then all of a sudden you can wake up a year from now and your margins are gone. And the importance of having a good, better, best offering to the marketplace, not just a single price, whether you're a professional services firm or you're offering, product solutions. And then the equivalent of pricing internally is compensation. And so, as you know, we just released a book earlier this year. It was an ebook last year, but it came out in print in April, called Scaling Up Compensation. And for most of our clients, as you know, Phil, compensation is one of the largest expenses that we have. And it's critical that we get the most out of every pound or dollar or euro that we spend on compensation. So we know that the devil is in the details. You can't just throw out these fancy bromides, that you've got to look at what we did, the 5 principles for designing a really robust compensation system that allows you to attract and retain the right talent. And then how do you price properly in the marketplace so you can continue to drive? And by the way, if I were to give us very concrete metric that I want everybody to stay laser focused on in this inflationary, recessionary kind of resignation time, and that is your gross margin, dollars, pounds, euros per employee. Again, your gross margin pounds per employee. And one of the things that we see is when companies hit about 10 million, that starts to drop because we start having to add in a lot of infrastructure and mid-management. And if you're not careful, that gross margin dollars begin to get squeezed. So Andy Bailey, who's one of our coaching partners, he was an early client. It wasn't Facebook or Google. He was running telecom stores, selling pagers, later on cell phones. And when he started with us, they were running about 75,000. Now this is US dollars per employee, gross margin dollars per employee. 7 years later, when he exited, they had taken that to 275,000, 4x the industry average. And so that's what we want to do, is have you look at your industry averages, revenue per employee, profit per employee, gross margin per employee. And we want to have you see, we want to help you 3 to 5 times that. As John Ratliff did in the call center business. That's an industry that averages 4% profitability. With our tools, he took that to 21.8%.
Amazing.
And so there is a player in every industry. And look, Phil, I'll let you get to your next question, but I want to give everybody a perspective here. The GDP of the world was about 34 trillion in the year 2000. Last year, it hit 94.5 trillion. We're roughly 3 times the global economy. And even if we were to see a depression, if the global economy was to drop by 5%, which would be considered dramatic, we would just be back to 2019 GDP. So my view is, if you can't find a way to make $1 million or $1 billion out of that global economy, it's your fault. You're just not on game. And that's why it's important. No one's ever achieved peak performance without a coach.
I love that.
And that's why we're in the business, is to be there by your side to help you make these things happen, as we've done for Naomi Simpson and Don Wells and 80,000 other companies over the last 40 years.
Wow. And I think that's amazing. There's a couple of facts in there which I love you bringing out. This thing about 3 to 5 times your industry average per employee. I think that's one thing. But then also, when you talk about that in terms of the economy, okay, we're 3 times where we are. So even if we drop back 5%, we're still going to be 2019 levels. So there's opportunity out there. So there's a whole load of things there, which I think I'd love to dive in a bit. Let's just come back to that, the OODA loop, because I think that's a big piece around this, around mindset and actually the observe and understand and orient. Because a lot of businesses are fearful of what's gone before, and they're looking in the rearview mirror rather than looking at the future to say, okay, what could be? What can we do this? So from a mindset point of view, you mentioned that scaling up, when the new book comes out, is going to be leading on purpose. What's the key message that you would give business owners right now in terms of just getting their own headset straight, apart from obviously having a coach walking beside them? What's the thing they need to be doing right now to recognize it's going to be okay if you focus on this?
Well, I'm going to cut right to it. One of the things that differentiates us, and this is going to seem very tactical, but it's the daily huddle. Again, if you want to move faster, you need to pulse faster. And it's 15 minutes or less. We're talking about a restroom break here out of your 8, 10, 12-hour workday. And it was interesting. Let me provide some context for it. I recently, in my weekly insight, pointed to what I think is probably the most important podcast, Phil, I've listened to this century. And it was the great strategist, Gary Hamel, out of Chicago. All the rest are at Harvard, but he's the rare one that's not. Gary Hamel's interview of Jim Clifton. And Jim is CEO of Gallup. And Gallup for 50 years has been measuring employee engagement. And he said, look, I hate to be so simplistic, but in 50 years, interviewing 100 million employees a year around the globe across all cultures, he said, we've got 2 very simple conclusions. First, Nobody wants managed. That's why we have these. This is what manages us. But what people do need is coached.
Yeah.
And most of us weren't trained on how to coach. And he said, so what does it really come down to be a coach? And he said, if every employee could be asked one question every week, and it would be this: what is your number one goal? And are there any barriers to achieving it? And that employee's answer creates the coachable moments. Now, how does that apply to the daily huddle? Now, I'm going to be a little technical here. I'm a mechanical engineer by training.
You and me both.
Right? But you need 6 data points to really see a trend. So if you're only hearing what's going on once a quarter, it's going to take you a year and a half before you're able to react. You survey the employees once a year, you survey the customers once a year. It's going to take you 6 years to see what's happening. Now, if you're getting data monthly, it's going to take you 6 months. If you're only looking at weekly, it's still going to take you a month and a half. But if you're getting a sense of what's happening in the organization daily, you're going to see what's happening in a week. And so here's the crazy part. Our agenda for the daily huddle, and we recommend every employee is in some kind of daily, is 3 questions. First, what's up today? What's your priority today? And when I hear that from my team, my question is that the most important thing they need to be working on versus the urgent? And is that aligned with what we've got to do next?
Yeah.
Number 2, I want to hear their metrics, and by them having to verbalize the numbers, and I'll give you an example in a moment, they're going to feel it viscerally and you're going to hear it every day. And then number 3, and then where is your stuck? Where is the barrier to you achieving? So in essence, we are asking the Jim Clifton question to every employee every day.
Wow.
And by me hearing the answer over the next 5 or 6 days, I'm going to now know my coachable moments. Wow. Are they working on the right thing? And I'm going to see a pattern of stocks, barriers to being able to achieve that. So I'll give you a very specific. A lot of CEOs have one-on-ones with their teams and individual team members, and this sucks up 4, 5, 6 hours a week.
Yep, too right.
And the problem is, in those one-on-ones, you have to be the bad person. You're saying, how is it going in recruiting employees? And your head of HR is like dancing around, well, da-da-da-da-da.
Always the same.
Yeah. So when my one client that I still coach, Doug, he was doing the one-on-ones. I said, look, let's replace that with an 8-minute daily huddle with your senior team. It's 8:52 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And now his head of HR every day is reporting out the number of open positions, the number of interviews. And within 2 weeks, somebody having to say the same open position number every day for 2 weeks, all of a sudden starts to clue you in that the needle is not moving. And he ended up realizing we could see it, but he then could see it that he needed to replace her. She absolutely was the wrong person driving HR for their company. In addition, he was getting ready to raise another round of financing. And in their business model, churn of their tenants is a critical number. And he was really only getting that number once a month. Once he had his team reporting to him daily what was the churn of their tenants, the whole team could see it and feel it and react quicker. And they got that fixed, which allowed them then to get the valuation, close to an $800 million valuation, which never would have happened if they hadn't fixed that. And then number 3, they raised a serious round of money then to invest in properties. And one of the numbers that Doug has reported out daily is, all right, what did we buy in the last 24 hours? And what progress are we making every day in getting that money invested? So just looking at number of hires and interviews daily, what their churn is daily, what they bought and invested in daily. Doug is able now to see the patterns and trends and the team and get a better gut feel for what's going on in the business. And that has allowed them to move quick in this crazy environment where interest rates are going up. and prices are starting to come down in real estate in the US and the like.
Yeah.
So that's the OODA loop.
Yeah, love that. And I love that. We always say, keep the main thing the main thing. But to me, that sounds like the number one thing that CEOs, managers need to be doing right now with their teams, having that conversation. You come back to your point earlier, to win the wars, to win the marketing, you need to get the intel. And that's providing that intel 6 times a week, 7 times a week if you need to. And it's just 8 minutes a day.
Yeah. Well, and we saw when we hosted, there's a Ukraine war going on right now. And General McChrystal helped us get on top of the Iraqi war. And the key was the daily huddle.
Yeah.
They got all 6,000 special forces to come on for 90 minutes, and they would debrief the missions the night before so that the intel they picked up, the new techniques and tactics that they could pick up could be translated immediately as the teams went out on a set of missions the next night. By the way, because of that, they were able to 10x the number of night missions, which allowed us to get on top of it. So that's one of the key things that we're really focused on, as well as where in the business model can we 10x something that's critical. And so for John Ratliff, the call center business is just rife with employee turnover. Way before the Great Resignation, it averages 200% a year. John was able to take that to 18%.
Wow.
That 10x internal advantage over the competition, it was significant. So one of our key questions is, first, do you have the intel that you need daily in order to maintain a good gut feel for how the business is doing and how your customers are feeling? Number two, where is that 10x advantage over the competition that then ultimately allows you to 10x your impact and reach over the next decade? And what's important is, if you only think, how do I 2 or 3x? I only have to do a little bit better than what I'm doing right now. But if I think, all right, what do I have to do to 10x? Then I have, even if you don't achieve that, then you've got to think differently. And it's that thinking different and being ambitious, as Margaret Heffernan said. The combination of those two and then focusing on it daily, there's the magic. And Phil, it's hard for us to explain that, except thank goodness we've got hundreds of case studies on our scaleups.com site that if people don't believe us, that we're achieving every single day. And you see it, Phil.
Yeah, I do. And I think this is key. And I think that word ambition is the key bit there, because I think, hearing all these things there, it's about the ambition of the business owner, the entrepreneur, the founder, to realize they can do these things. But actually, sometimes you just need that other person walking alongside you to give you that bit of clarity. And that's what we bring to it as coaches. And I've always said, I've been coaching for a long time now, but actually we all should have the coach alongside us. Eric Schmidt said it a long time ago at Google, the biggest investment the Google boys made in him was about having that coach. And to me, that's the thing that gives you the 10x thinking, because without that, you're not thinking far enough into the future. So I'm hearing that loud and clear from you there.
It's a good example. Every year I named the #1 business book. It's one of the things I did for Fortune magazine for years. So I've continued that. And last year's, it was Hubert Jolie's book, The Heart of Business. And I really do hope, besides reading Scaling Up, I hope all your listeners read Hubert's book, The Heart of Business. It was really one of the great turnarounds in the US of Best Buy. Here you had Amazon coming on, Circuit City failing and all that. Yet he 10x'd the value of that company from $11 a share to $110 a share. But what was interesting is, he's this French CEO, and he came from Europe to come over and lead this turnaround. And even though he's this hugely, highly experienced leader, the first thing the board did was get him a coach. And it happened to be, by the way, Marshall Goldsmith. And this is new news, but we just landed. Marshall Goldsmith chose us, our Growth Institute, to produce his first master course on coaching. Wow. And so we're super excited that we're going to be able to make that available, because not only does a company need an outside coach, as Steve Jobs had, as Eric Schmidt did, as Hubert Jolie did, and our clients do, but then we've got to learn how to coach internally. And we're super excited that we're going to have literally the guy recognized as the #1 CEO coach in the world producing a master course for us.
I think that's amazing. And the fact that he's chosen Growth Institute, I saw something on LinkedIn the other day about Growth Institute has just been recognized as well for some amazing growth in the US as well. So Growth Institute, for any client who haven't seen that, you need to get on there because there's so much material you can pick up just by looking at some of the Growth Institute courses. If you can't afford to read a book this week, go and look at a Growth Institute course because there's so much information in there. And the guys that have really driven that business.
Well, and what that does, it comes back, Phil, and let me frame this for your listeners. We rooted our work, a lot of our work, in Jim Collins' research. You know, here's a guy that took 25 years. He's taken some hits, but look, he really studied what it took to get from good to great. Yeah. And so our 4 decisions, people, strategy, execution, and cash, we didn't just make that up. That was rooted in what Jim and the work at IDEO did that said, if you want to go from good to great, you have to have disciplined people. There's people engaged in disciplined thought that drives strategy through disciplined action, which is the execution piece. And then in Jim's last really significant book, Great by Choice, he then realized, but you can't run out of cash. So you better have, so the people, strategy, execution, cash came from Jim's work and our 3 fundamental offerings. The only way you're going to have disciplined people is with a coach. Anyone who's ever worked out knows that you're going to progress much better and more rapidly if you've got a trainer than if not. Same with golf. I'm really enjoying playing golf with my sons this summer, and I had this worst slice, and I finally all right, who's the best guy in the world to fix a slice? Hank Haney, which was Tiger Woods' coach.
Okay.
And Hank promised that he's helped 70,000 people fix their slice in 5 minutes. And sure enough, I took him up on it and he did. I have not sliced the golf ball since, knock on wood. So disciplined people require coaching. Yeah. Disciplined thought requires ongoing education. And as you and I've talked about, you know, the final decision Steve Jobs made before he died was to launch Apple University. People don't realize that was his really last and most famous contribution. And look, I think the real measure of a leader is how well do your children perform when you're not there, and how well does your company perform when you're not there. And look, Steve's been gone now for 11 years, and it's the highest market cap company on the planet. And the credit goes to the fact that he installed a company university. So our Growth Institute is really meant to be this outsourced company university for mid-market companies. Yeah. And then he said the key to scaling action is through technology. And that then is our Align or scoreboard platform. So coaching, learning, and tech are our 3 offerings. And they're there because they're rooted in the science of what Jim described or discovered helps you go from good to great. Yeah. So we've got the 100% solution, and frankly, none of our competitors do.
No, I love that. And, you know, and I'm working on a program with Don Monkhouse at the moment with a worldwide company. There's a coach in Australia, a coach in Poland, me in the UK, and Dom in the UK. We're working worldwide with that. They're working through the Growth Institute program, and we are coaching them, in fact, in 45 minutes time on an hour's call with guys in Canada and Europe to try and do that. And it's the value they get. They can watch the Growth Institute each week. And, you know, I'm not selling it here, but I am selling it. It says it's such a good program. And then they get an hour of my time to answer all the questions and do things that. So I love that combination you're talking about, the technology which can enable it, which makes it happen. So Verne, look, we're going to run out of time here in terms of, and there's so many more questions I could ask you, but your time's limited. This has been fabulous. If there was one thing, and it's always a question, I always think about, you know, how do we end these shows? And I always think the question I always like to ask is, if you could go back 30 years ago, when you set this up, with what you know now, what would you do differently back then to get you off the ground? Or what would you do the same again if you made it right the first time?
I think it's always to be even more bold. You know, I think, and I forgot who said it. Was it Bill Gates or one of them who said, we way overestimate what we can achieve in a year, but we way underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years. And trust me, at my age, as you know, I just turned 50 about 13 years ago. That 10 years goes by quick. And what has been impressive, whether it's Gene Brown with City Bend, who just, by the way, finally exited that company there in Ireland,
yeah,
or Naomi Simpson, or any of them, when Naomi set her, let's maybe end where we started. So there in 2005, Naomi had sold about 7,500 experiences, and she just, she's an ex-marketing exec from Apple, but she just couldn't get the thing going. So she brought her team to our first 2-day workshop we offered in Sydney. And by the way, Scott Fuchs and his team were there from Atlassian.
Atlassian guys,
They
yeah.
60 billion in market cap. And I've moved Scott's endorsement to the front of the book in the revision. And he still's been kind enough to give me shout outs. Most recently at the Wells Fargo board meeting, he shouted out, my name is why they think they've achieved what they've done to 60 billion. But Naomi was sitting there, and we got her to focus on a BHAG of selling 2 million experiences. And as I quote in the intro of the revised book, she thought that was insane that they would achieve that. Yet she beat it by 2 years.
Wow. She
accomplished it in 2013 instead of 2015, 8 years later. And that's what's helped her continue to be bold in setting these very aggressive, big, hairy, audacious goals. Yeah. So I think I don't have really regrets. I'm proud of EO and all that the number of companies that we've really helped and the stories that we're able to share. But look, I want to continue to help 10, if not 100x. Yeah. Hopefully in my next, 50 plus years.
Yeah, I love that. We're running the program, the 20,000 scale-ups worldwide as well. So, from our perspective, we're all behind this to make this work, because actually, if we can get that economy going, that small business, that startup business to turn into scale-ups, that's where the world goes. I saw a great press release from the UK government recently that they're going to be creating special visas for scale-up programs, scale-up companies in the UK to bring employees in. And to me, that's the key to do it. We've been through Brexit. We've lost a lot of talent, I believe. And actually, we need to do something different. So actually, the government's focusing on scale up, because that is the bit that's going to spin the economy faster. And it says at the beginning of the Scaling Up book, you've got to get that middle ground going, because actually the elephants have passed it. The startups are gone. We've got to get that middle ground, because that's what drives the economy long term. And that's what we need right now.
Well, and Phil, you saw, we just put the article up a few weeks ago. We promised the city of Westminster, which, by the way, is a client of ours.
Yeah.
We're working directly with them and leading their planning. And they want to be the #1 city for scale-ups. So our promise with the 20,000 scale-ups is that we would help some of the 150 companies we're working with exit for something north of $1 billion, because that money tends to stay local. Well, 4 of the 5 companies in our first cohort 48 months ago have all exited for combined almost $1 billion. So we beat our own BHAG. We promised that over 10 years. Yeah. It got accomplished in the first 48 months. So
it's amazing.
We do know this stuff works. Phil, I'm glad you're there to help us support both the UK and the globe. And I appreciate the time here to share these ideas.
Thank you, Verne. It's been great to speak to you. And thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing you. I won't see you in Denver, but I shall look forward to seeing you when we're next paths cross somewhere in the world. But Verne Harnish, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right, Phil. Take care.
Thank you. My guest on the Sparks by Ignium podcast today is Verne Harnish. Verne Harnish is the founder of Entrepreneurs Organization and the creator of the Scaling Up Principle. I've come across Scaling Up in the last 6 years as a result of conversation with Dom Monkhouse and other people. Dom and I talked about this back in 2015, not long after the Scaling Up book was published. And I've learned so much just by being part of this organization for the last 24 months. It took me a while to get in, but I'm glad I did. Reason being, we're looking at changing the world. We're looking at changing the world by helping those scale-ups that bring power to the economy, that add value. And if you listen to Verne today, you're going to hear so many little nuggets of advice that he's got from 30 plus years of doing this. Verne's an engineer by background with an MBA, and he combines this to help you understand what it takes to drive your business forwards. Listen out for his words on the huddle and how the daily huddles help them and other people bring value to their management team by asking some critical questions around what is you're stuck on today? What's the barriers to helping you achieving it? Because actually that's the bit that helps you coach your employees. Because when you're asking them questions, they can take their own action as opposed to relying on you giving it to them. So listen what Verne says around that. Listen to his words around being ambitious and ignoring what's going on in the marketplace and being possible to actually look at how you extend your reach by differentiating yourself in the future. Being bold is what comes out at the end. Listen to this, understand. Now, as I always say, I can't hold you to account, but I can help you listen. There's so much material out there. If you need help, if you want coaching, the key message from this is about how a coach walking alongside you helps you achieve that performance. Listen in. Enough from me. Here's Verne Harnish. Enjoy the show. Let me know what you think.